Hello, and welcome to our second session of Ed Talks, quick session talks that will focus on economic development and recovery for our regional business. Thank you all for attending today. The Rockford Area Economic Development Council has recognized and reacted to serve our region in the best way we can to support our community efforts to respond, recover, and now reopen our local business and manufacturers. Please take time to reference the RAEDC website for additional reopen support and direction. As we look to the future, we at the RAEDC, in collaboration with the Rockford University and the Puri School of Business, will be hosting frequent Ed Talks. These conversations will focus on the economic development issues we face amid this pandemic, with the purpose to provide expert guidance on how to adapt and overcome those issues. Today's topic is Reengineering Your Workplace, Finding Balance After a Pandemic. Reengineering is the fundamental rethinking and redesign of business processes to achieve dramatic improvements in the critical and contemporary measures of performance, such as cost, quality, service, and speed. Today's discussion will be about reimagining your workplace to help your business and employees find balance after the pandemic. About our presenter, Dr. Mull. Dr. Mandolen Mull is the chair of the Puri School of Business, director of the Accelerated Business Program, and an assistant professor of leadership at Rockford University. Dr. Mull has a PhD in organizational development and change and an MBA in international business. Before coming to Rockford, Dr. Mull was a faculty member at Tarleton State University and the McLean School of Business at the University of Mary Hardin Baylor, where she taught courses in business management, statistics, and business. Prior to joining the realm of academia, Dr. Mull occurred over a decade of corporate leadership experience in the fields of healthcare, property preservation, and logistical distribution. Possessing an extensive background in leadership performance, Dr. Mull consults with organizations across the globe, providing analysis and interventions targeted to improve organizational performance outcomes. Dr. Mull also conducts scholarly research pertaining to leadership intentions, change management, and statistical analysis. Before we get started, at the end of this presentation, Dr. Mull will answer questions. Please submit your questions through the chat box function. I will read those questions to Dr. Mull at the end of her presentation. And now, with great pleasure, I would like to introduce my professor, Dr. Mandolen Mull. Dr. Mull?
Hi, Joe. Thank you so much for having me. And I just want to thank everybody for dialing in and tuning in this week. I know on our last session, I had a number of individuals who reached out to me, and that was really lovely. It was absolutely fantastic because that gives my work meaning. When I get the opportunity to hear from people saying, hey, what are your thoughts about this? I heard your talk about leading through a crisis, and that was something that was really helpful for me. It really gives me this insight, and I'm able to then bounce ideas off of all of you. So I really find this work rewarding, and I just genuinely thank you so much for having me back again today. And so today what we're going to be talking about is reengineering your workforce, finding balance after a pandemic, as Jared said. And what's great about this is, it's kind of a denouement of so much of what my work is. So a lot of my work is on leadership development and organizational development and change management. And pretty much everything I do hinges in those realms. So when we talk about reengineering, it's really all about that. It's about change. It's about development, both at the leadership level and the organizational level. And so I'm thrilled to get to talk with you about this topic. This is actually a topic that I have an entire MBA class on. And right now I'm teaching it this summer. I taught it last summer as well. A lot of our, up and coming business leaders here in the greater Rockford area are learning about reengineering. So those of you right now that are dialed in, you may have, leaders that are learning this information, and what a great resource for you to be able to tap into, and a valuable asset for your organization. So I hope you'll find this to be quite useful for you today. All right, so starting off, I'm going to address some basic assumptions about organizational growth and what my students have fondly referred to as mullings. A play on my last name, to be sure. Oftentimes, we talk about momentum, which is, again, a play on my last name, but my students have started calling some of my sayings mullings. So here we go. Students have often heard me say, what got you here won't get you there. Now, this is not something I created. This is a book by Malcolm Goldsmith that talks about this idea of the days of being average are over. The world is constantly changing. We certainly know that where we're at right now and why we're trying to reopen, and we're ushering in a whole new workforce for ourselves and a whole new way of us doing work. And obviously what got us to the point of success pre-COVID is not going to be the same strategies, tools, resources, everything to that extent that's going to move us forward. There used to be a saying that I heard when I was growing up, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. It's no longer true. If you always do what you've always done, you're going to get less. And the reason that you're going to get less is because the world is constantly moving. Our organizations, our competitors are always trying to take us out, right? Everybody is trying to vie for that competitive advantage. And so if we just keep doing what we've always done, at some point the laws of diminishing returns go into effect. Recently, I was talking with a former student of mine and I said something along the lines of, well, it's always worked for me. And he said, are you serious? The person who can't go 5 minutes without saying what got you here won't get you there, and if you always do what you've always done, you'll get less than what you've always gotten, is trying to tell me that she's always done it this way, so it's going to be successful. I hate it when my students turn it back on me. They listen more than I give them credit for, right? I'm physician heal thyself, so it's very helpful for me to hear that, to say the least. Another thing that I think we should be thinking about right now when we're talking about reengineering is if you and I only accept what we see in our organizations, we can never change what we see. If we only accept what we can see, we'll never be able to change it. What that means is if we're, we don't realize it all the time, but we're working with blinders. We're working in constraints, constant constraints. And we get into these routines. It's human nature to get into routines. It's very, very common. It's expected to be. It's part of evolutionary science. But at some point, we start to think that this is all the world that we have, or this is the way we have to do this. And that's why, so often we hear things about, this is the way we've always done it. I'll talk about that here in a moment. When we're talking about changing things, being creative, I'm going to come back to that, about if we only accept what we can see, we'll never be able to change what we can see. I'm going to come back to that. It's important to remember that growth cannot occur in an environment of fear. My students hear me say this a lot. And if your people are acting in a state of fear, if you're seeing defense mechanisms, you're seeing them being very defensive about their work, you're seeing them being defensive about how things are going, you have to start to wonder, why is that there? What is it that's creating them, that impetus for them to put up that barrier to you? And sometimes you and I, like, a situation with COVID-19, we cannot always address that element of fear. We cannot always remove it from our people. I should say that. We cannot always remove it, but we can always address it. And that's what we should do. We can say, guys, I know it's a scary time right now. I know we have a lot of uncertainty. I know people are fatigued. I know you're tired, but I believe in you. I believe in the work that we're doing. We're navigating these things together. When you can remove the element of fear, do it. People cannot grow in an environment of fear. They're not going to be creative. They're not going to give you their best. They're going to do as best they can to try to get through whatever it is that they're afraid of. They're acting off of emotions typically. And most of us, that's not when we work our best. This is what I was getting to here a moment ago. Complacency or the phrase of this is how we've always done it is absolutely the death knell of progress. If we only accept what we can see, we never can change what we can see. That means we've gotten ourselves into these very common complacency traps. And we start to think that the way that we are doing this is the way it should be done. And so what I ask of you is, do you know all the ways in which to do your job, or do you just know one way really well? Does your organization know all the ways in which to deliver quality product to your customers, products or services, or does it just know one way really well? And that's a question that you have to ask yourself and really drill down as you start to get into that. And so we are the stories we tell ourselves, my friends. And if we start to tell ourselves, we've always done it this way, nothing in this place ever changes, we're so antiquated, we're outdated, you know, this place is dysfunctional. Newsflash, we're all dysfunctional, we're just varying degrees of dysfunction. But if we're telling ourselves those stories, we start to become it. And if we're telling ourselves that story, why? I come back and I contend that that's disconnect, that's discontent, that there's a disconnection and a disengagement of our work. And when we start saying negative things like that about our workplace, it's a call of ourselves wanting to be more creative, wanting to be more autonomous, wanting to have imagination. And this is what's critical when we're doing reengineering for our organizations. This is absolutely critical for us. And that means sometimes destruction is vital to construction. Sometimes we have to kind of fall apart to rebuild up. And that's reengineering as well, because it's a very transformational type change versus some of the more lean processes that tend to be incremental. Even positive change is disruptive. So even good change in and of itself is disruptive. We are inherently hardwired biologically to resist change. And so it's not that we necessarily resist change, we resist being changed. And so even positive change is disruptive. And we as leaders have to acknowledge that this is a good thing, but we're going to have growing pains. Oftentimes, when I'm working with clients, I will see change agents try to gloss over that fact, right? They just kind of say, this is good for everybody and believe it, and we'll move forward. And I'm like, no, there's going to be some pain points. And let's be very transparent in that. That's being ethical and strong leaders, is saying there are going to be some pain points as we navigate through this. And you know, it's being realistic. Your people know more than what you give them credit for. Give them credit and be transparent with them on that. Oftentimes, people think, you know, if we just get on the other side of this change, if we just get on the other side of this crisis, if we just get on the other side of whatever it is, it'll be better. The grass isn't greener on the other side. The grass is greenest where we're going to water it, where we put our efforts. Where are you putting your efforts right now? If you're putting your efforts on not being good for today, but being good long-term, sustainably, then that's where you're going to have the greenest grass. This is important, my friends, because so often you and I are putting out fires in our day-to-day work. And when we are firefighters like that, we're not planning for long-term. All we're doing is catching what's coming at us. And we're doing pretty well, and we'll feel pretty productive, but the reality is we're only solving short-term problems. And if we're only solving short-term problems, we're never creating long-term solutions. That's a mindset that we have to start thinking about when we're thinking about reengineering. Oh, my students love hearing me talk about totality, holistic, panoptic, integrated, intentional. Yeah, these are all my buzzwords that they hear me say all the time. When we think about reengineering, when we think about any type of organizational growth, we need to be thinking about it in a very integrated way. I'm working with a client right now that's doing a continuous improvement project. Fantastic. Kudos to them. Only problem is they're only focusing that continuous improvement on their operations side, like the manufacturing side. They're actually not looking at it from the sales, the HR, the accounting, the engineering sides. And yet, to be a fully functioning organization, they need all those components. And so when we talk about reengineering, I'm saying it's integrated. All of those people have a value add to the product that gets delivered to your customer. And if that's the case, if we believe that, and we should believe that, otherwise why do these people have jobs, right? We should believe that, then continuous improvement should be looked at throughout the organization, not just in our warehouses, not just in our plants, not just in our distribution centers. This should be something that we're looking at from the customer ask to the customer deliverable. And I'm going to get into that a lot more here in a moment, but it's a panoramic view, my friends. That's what we're trying to look at here. I am often quoted as saying, change is hard, but we do the hard thing now to make it easier later, rather than do the easy thing now to make it harder later. You know, a lot of the changes that you and I are going through in our organizations right now is because of something that was completely out of our control. We didn't ask for COVID-19 to come about, and the changes that we're having to make, I'm kind of on the fly right now, and now we're getting a little bit more planning into the process, thank goodness. But we are doing some hard things right now, and hopefully we're using it as an opportunity, as an impetus to create more long-term sustainability, rather than it just being, you know, putting out a fire. And for you and I as leaders, when we're talking about organizational growth and we're talking about reengineering, it requires you and I to have self-reflection. That means we have to be intentional about that. We have to sit down and say, did I overreact in this situation? Could I have done this better? Did I let my emotions get to the best of me? Did I put up a defense there and not listen to what a good idea somebody had? Did I just punish somebody for having a good idea because it wasn't my idea? Sometimes we have to sit there and look at those kind of things. And we have to use the credibility that we have with others to ask them to trust us to lead them, to ask them to trust us to navigate them through what's up ahead. And that's how we start to find balance. So what we're going to talk about in the remainder of our session today is the Peter Principle. Some of you may know that. And of course, reengineering, which is the main topic here. So the Peter Principle is always a fun subject for me to talk about. I was actually having a meeting yesterday with a gentleman, and it was a very, candid, off the cuff conversation. And someone said, yeah, it's kind of like people get, become victim to the Peter Principle. And I went, I'm talking about that tomorrow. Yes, absolutely. The Peter Principle is the whole reason I got an MBA. So the Peter Principle is a hard truth, my friends. The Peter Principle says that people get promoted past their level of competency. We get promoted one level too far. And this occurs because we're oftentimes promoted based on our past performance and not the potential for our success in a new role. So I was working at a company that was rapidly growing, and I was seeing all these people getting promoted up to senior executive levels, and I was rapidly getting promoted. And I thought, these folks don't know what they're doing. And my boss actually was telling me, I don't know what I'm doing, and I think I'm in over my head. And she actually ended up resigning because she just knew she wasn't capable, she was going to fail at her job. And I didn't want that to be me. I had an undergraduate degree in political science. I didn't really know a lot about business. I knew about people, but I didn't really understand a lot about business. So I thought, I've got to go and get an MBA. And it was in my first semester that somebody taught me the Peter Principle, and I went, oh, that's why I'm here. This is why I'm here. You're probably thinking of some of your colleagues right now that may have fallen prey to the Peter Principle. But friends, it is a frequent natural progression of growth. It's going to happen to us all. But we can hedge against it. We can have some plans that we hedge against. Even the most talented of us, the most dedicated of us, can truly fall prey to this. Because how often do we really sit back and say, I think I'm in over my head, and I think I've been promoted one level too far. I think I'm incompetent in my job. Most of us are not looking at ourselves that much. So the ways that we can kind of navigate the Peter Principle is that we can ask for help from individuals with different social styles than you. And I've hyperlinked this. I know that this, I think Jared said they're going to post this again on the website so that you can actually come in and on the social styles. What I've given you is an assessment tool that tells you what your social style is. You can give it to your colleagues, you can give it to your team members. It also gives you some information about each social style. And then where I've hyperlinked you gives you some descriptors. And I want you to write down your colleagues that fill in kind of those blanks for each of those styles. For example, I am an expressive personality. I am guided by my emotions. I'm a big picture thinker. I'm a very holistic thinker. I'm a visionary type person. I'm not really good at the nooks and crannies of things. And so I tend to seek out drivers or analyticals who are very task oriented. Individuals who can really think in very strategic ways, and they can think in very linear ways. My brain does not think linearly. So because I know that, I seek out my colleagues who do think that way, especially when I'm working on big projects, and I'll give you an example here in a moment. You can employ unlearning strategies. If you attended the prior ed talk that I gave, I've hyperlinked it here. Unlearning, it's some of my research that talks about, us creating this cognitive pause, us believing that what got us here won't get us there, and understanding that we are in a new environment. An example of this is my father is currently battling stage 4 cancer back home in Texas. And the other day I was talking to him and he keeps taking aspirin. And I said, Diddy, you cannot take aspirin anymore. And he said, I've done it my whole life. It's no problem. I said, yes, sir. Absolutely. But you weren't battling stage 4 cancer and on immunotherapy treatments. You shouldn't be taking it. And my father got very, very quiet. And he said, I'm listening. I hear you. And so I guess the youngest daughter can get a little feisty even 1,300 miles away. But for me, that was me coaching him through of unlearning. Daddy, you're in a whole new arena right now. You're in a new world. What worked for you before is not applicable where you're at today. And so, our unlearning strategies don't always say that it's not applicable, but it says we have to at least appreciate that we're in a new realm. We can coach up. This is what I did the other day. I'm on a very, very technical type document for our reaccreditation here at the Peoria School of Business. And I know I have blind spots, but I don't know that I know what they all are. And so I called our provost up and I told him that. I said, I really need you to be critical of me. I need your eyes on this. I need you to look at it for me because there's a lot of people counting on me in this, and I'm worried I may fail them. Just because I'm afraid I'm not seeing the whole picture right now. I'm not thinking through all of this stuff very linearly. And his response was fantastic. And he said, thank you for telling me. Now I know how to support you and I will help you. And what's great about that now, right? Now that meant that I had to be vulnerable. I had to have some self-reflection. I had to have some intentionality for us to ask for help. But what that allowed us to do was to work in concert together. And so when he does come back and say, Mandolen, this isn't where it needs to be, or something's not appropriate, that gives me that check of, I asked for his help on this, right? And so my defenses don't come up then. And so that really allows for a lot more fluidity. So if we're coaching up and telling our supervisors where we need help, they're helping develop our growth, and it helps develop their growth as well. And then, of course, the last thing that we can do to hedge against the Peter principle, because the Peter principle is not going to just happen to you and I. It'll happen to our organizations collectively. And so reengineering is something that we really need to be thinking about collectively as an organization. And this involves, as I said, leadership, development, and change. So reengineering works on this predication that we are operating in the 21st centuries with business processes that were designed in the 19th century to work really well in the 20th century. So if we go back and we think about Adam Smith and his division of labor way back when, right? And what he was saying was that, instead of having 10 people create one unit, we could have, a multitude of people creating one segment, one process. of the work to be done, a product that to be given to our customer. And that would actually ramp up the work. So we didn't need someone to do it from start to finish. We needed a lot of different people who worked in little silos. And that assembly line, obviously Ford then, revolutionized that in a very big way. Now, in some ways, this is kind of the Humpty Dumpty approach, right? So we took a process that had a beginning and an end. Customer asked for something, the person created that product or that service and delivered it to the customer. And we broke it all down into a whole bunch of different pieces. And then we glued it all back together with a whole bunch of different managers with decentralized management, right? Oh, what kind of problems does that create? Well, in some ways it can be very efficient, but in other ways it can create a lot of opportunity for being stagnant, for complacency, for dropping the ball, right? That those handoffs don't happen as smoothly as we think they could, that we get into routines and we continue to collect information from our customer that no longer is relevant. We continue to have forms that we really don't need. We're duplicating work. We're not adding value, and nobody's sat back and really thought about the whole playing field. Nobody's looked at this in a panoptic way to say, we're not connecting all the ties together. So reengineering requires transformational, not just incremental change. And so this is huge. What this means is a lot of lean processes that people employ are looking at maybe one process. This is looking at the process throughout the organization, and it's really revolutionizing the entire organization. And it focuses on those invisible processes, those invisible aspects of our company, which is process. So oftentimes I will hear people talk about organizational structure, organizational culture. They don't really talk to me about the processes. And the processes are really about how the work is getting through from the customer ask to the customer deliverable. And what I am often telling clients is that a great organizational structure laid over poor processes will still produce poor results. So what I mean by that is, clients can tell me where a customer asks for this on our user interface on the computer, and it goes through to this department, and then it moves on to this department, and then it moves on to this department, et cetera, et cetera. And I say, that's your structure. That's your structure. What I need to know, the process, is what is all the information that you're asking for? What are you using from every single aspect of that information? A good example of this is here at Rockford University. If a student asks to take an independent study course, it requires 5 signatures: the students, the instructors, the advisor, the department chair, and the registrar. In many of those cases, I am 3 of those signatures. So there's really not a check and balance going on there, right? And it's not as effective as it should be. And we're really looking at a lot of our processes today. We're realizing that we have a lot of forms, that we ask a lot of information that we don't do anything with anymore. So we're wasting our students' time, we're wasting faculty time, we're wasting administrators' times. And is it really adding value to the student experience? And those are things that we're having to have conversations about. And that's what I would really, really encourage you to be thinking about in your organization. People don't always want to talk about processes because they seem to be a little bit hard for people to understand at first, but it's the way, it's how things are moving throughout your organization. How is that information moving along to carry your customer request to their deliverable? And so the main premise of reengineering is a blank slate approach. And I'm going to give you a challenge later where I ask you to think about this. If you were to design your organization and business unit from scratch today, what would it look like? This is what reengineering is at its heart. If we were to redesign it from scratch today, now COVID-19 has really pushed our hands in a lot of these ways, right? I mean, like I said, here at RU, we tended to be very paper-based. We're a small university. We're very personalized with our students. We know them very, very, very well. We know our colleagues very well. People are not a number. I can call the registrar and I can talk about a student and she'll say their name. We don't know their ID numbers. We genuinely do not know their ID numbers. And so because we know everybody so well, it's happened on a very, personal process base. And because we had to all work from home and the things that we're doing, we're looking at much more ways to let technology work for us now. We were working within the confines of technology. We are now starting to realize that we can create technology to work for us. And so there's some really cool things that are happening here at RU. And people around me have been hearing me say it's a new day. And it is. It's a new day with some really cool opportunities ahead for us that we're very, very excited about. And I will tell you, I challenged my team recently here at the Peoria School of Business with this blank slate approach. For example, I have a meeting this afternoon. We're revamping our undergraduate marketing degree. I called up our marketing professor, Dr. Jeff Karlberg, and I said, I want you to think about an end-to-end experience for someone who's in a marketing role. They need to understand consumer behavior, the psychology behind marketing, and then I needed them to understand principles of marketing. And then I need them to understand graphic design and web design and analytics and how to make decision making on that and economics. And so think about that end to end. Don't look at our curriculum. I said, don't look at any of the courses we already have on the books. Think it through conceptually. Think through what a student would need from start to finish if they were working on a marketing project. What are all the hands that they would need to hand off to or that they would need help with? Think about that and let's create a curriculum based on that. And so this afternoon, Jeff, myself, and our chair of the graphic design department, Dr. Chris Sisson, and I'm the chair of our web design department, Dr. Donna Ogle, we're all going to be having a meeting today to talk about this and then figure out how do we create the curriculum for that. And we're doing that with all of our degrees. And I will tell you, when I called Professor Jeff Karlberg about that, he was so excited. If any of you know him, I think he gives me a run for money as energetic as I am. But he was so excited and he said, my mind's going in 20,000 different directions. He was so excited to get this opportunity. If you were to design it from scratch, what does it look like, right? Oh, what an empowering feeling as a leader to be able to give that to one of your people. And then for them and to see it and to hear the excitement in their voice. Friends, this is the opportunity we have right now. COVID-19 came in, it gave us a big disruption, and we can use it for positive change. And reengineering gives us this opportunity to really sit here and say, if we were going to redesign it from scratch, what would it look like? Okay. So now you're probably thinking, well, that sounds great and dandy, but I don't know. How do I actually begin this process? I can't be just like you, Mandolen, and just call somebody up and say, create it from scratch. I hope that you can, because that's pretty fun, I have to admit. But what you can do is create a team, like a project process reengineering team. And that this team have insiders and outsiders. And for every 2 to 3 insiders, have an outsider, somebody that doesn't work within your department or your organization. Somebody that can give you more of that holistic, canopic view for you, okay? Oh, utilize the help of naysayers. Please, please, please utilize the help of those folks that always play devil's advocate. They are so valuable for you right now. You want to hear their critiques. You want to hear how it's not going to work. You know why? Because they're going to shoot holes through everything and they'll make you better. Empower them to make you better. And that might just get you new results from them, which is really, really cool too, to see that. To see, people don't want to be disgruntled, right? What did I say discontent was earlier? It's that nagging of creativity, of imagination. Those, malcontents in our organizations, they don't want to be malcontents, friends. They want to be empowered. They want to be inspired. Giving them the opportunity to start saying, let's create this from scratch. What does it look like? Tell me what you think it could be, right? Utilize their help and see them come rise to the occasion. I would very much encourage you not to place current organizational constraints on your team. So do not say, within these confines of, for example, our current software systems. Now, you could say with the current technology available in the market or in the industry, that's absolutely understandable, because many of us are not working with the current technology, right? Some of us are, but many of us are not. And so I would ask you not to put any constraints on them right now as they're brainstorming through. So a lot of times when I'm doing re-engineering efforts, I really like to do them in a focus group base, because I like to get a lot more ideas and free flowing, but focus groups allow us to be a little bit more targeted toward our initiatives while still opening up for that creativity than just regular brainstorming sessions. It's hard to tell people just be creative, right? But if you can kind of guide them through that, but I would encourage you not to put constraints. If they sit there and say things like, oh, well, so-and-so's department isn't going to like it if we do this, or so-and-so isn't going to like this, or we don't have the budget for that. Take all that off the table for right now. Let them humor you, okay? Because great ideas can really be inspiring. Friends, so often we punish people for failure, and I'll get to that here in a moment. But I want to tell you something. If we're not failing, then we haven't found our edges. We're not fully expanding to what our capabilities are. If we're just playing it safe all the time, when we fail, we just bumped up against one of our edges, right? And that's what I try to create with my teams is I don't always know how things are going to work, but I believe in the resiliency of my team. Oh my goodness, are they great? I absolutely believe in their resiliency. And if we try something and it didn't work, we're going to bounce back and we're going to come back with more information at this time. We learned something through that process and we found our edge. That wasn't quite right for us. We got to dial it back a little bit. But if I'm not bumping up against that edge, I'm not growing. And if I'm not growing, what did I say? We're going to get less than what we've always gotten, right? And so much of what we're working with, we've really got to push and push out these boundaries. You might also want to be thinking about creating a project team of individuals that have varied decision-making abilities. I recently was working on a project and a team of us all came together and we started to ask questions. We had somebody from the registrar, from IT, myself, financial aid, academic affairs. And what was great about it was I was explaining that we had a very cumbersome, kind of clunky onboarding process for our students. Once they got admitted and then they got into our system and got advised, there was kind of a back and forth that had to occur. I said, this is just really, it's not smooth. It's not a smooth process. And everybody in the room said, no, it's not. And I said, well, why is that? Why are we doing it that way? Everybody kind of looked at each other and said, we don't really know. Prior to that, we hadn't put all those people in the room together. Other people thought that another department needed it to be that way. And that department was saying, I didn't need it that way. And the other department was saying, well, I don't need it that way. I don't need it that way. We think we should just smooth this out. We solved that in about 30 minutes, which never happens in higher ed, if any of you work in higher education. And we solved the problem. We created a more streamlined process. But it was because we had all the people at the table, which was really, really crucial. And so sometimes the way that we are doing work is predicated on antiquated knowledge, antiquated information, antiquated habits. We think that we continue to do the work that we're doing because somebody else's department is relying on us to do it this way. When was the last time we checked in to make sure that that's exactly how they needed that to go? This is my point. Project teams can be very valuable for you in re-engineering efforts. And again, I want you to be focusing on how the product or service is processing through the organization, not that structure or the frame with which it passes through, right? So you're really wanting to think through what is the actual process flow? How is the work being conducted and getting done? Not all the different departments and handoffs that's going on, because that can really create some static to the conversation. So, I said that the quickest way to stymie growth is to ensure that we do not the quickest way to stymie growth and ensure that we do not have creative thoughts and the best and brightest of our thoughts is to punish people for trying to change the status quo. As long as it's a good effort, right? I'm not saying just let them go crazy, but I do believe a lot of times we punish people for failures instead of saying that was a learning opportunity, what did we learn? And again, that goes back to an environment of fear. We have to be thinking about how transparently we are communicating with our team, being transparent with them, letting them know that we may not know how this is going to work out, that we, based on all the information that we have, we're acting in the best interest of our team, of our organization, that we believe it's going to work, right? I mean, obviously, or are we undertaking it? That we have data that's informing us, but because we are trying something new, there may be roadblocks, there may be stopgaps that we face that we haven't encountered before because it's something new. And yet you have to remind your team that you believe in them. Giving them heads up, hey, I don't have all the information, but this is what's coming down the pipe. Giving you a heads up reduces a lot of fear for people when they at least know that you're being transparent with them. Asking for feedback and giving them feedback is crucial. We have to be willing to hear feedback. We can try new initiatives, and as I'm sitting here working on projects and I'm doing a lot of new initiatives, one of the biggest ones that we've recently done here, I'm incredibly proud of here at Rockford University, is our adult learner program, and we are now accepting documented work training. We have made that program, all the reasons that people told us they couldn't get a college degree. It didn't work with their schedule. Well, we offer it either totally online or totally face-to-face or a combination thereof at their choice. And it's offered in the evenings. They told us that, they didn't want to start from ground zero. We're accepting documented work training. We're accepting credentials, certifications. We're accepting, manufacturing credits, those kind of things, and applied science degrees. So we have now made our degrees so much more beneficial. And when we do that, it should work. We hope it's going to work, that it's going to benefit members of our community and benefit all of your organizations. When we have a higher educated workforce, we have higher educated communities, right? People have higher incomes. We have greater economic development in our communities. This is an initiative I've been working 18 months on, friends, and I believe in it so much. And fortunately, here at Rockford University, they believe in me for it, and they're letting us run with this. And we're encountering new things, and I'm really hoping that this works because I believe in it. And so the conversations that I'm having with people is very transparent about it, and that's going to be crucial for you to have with your team. We are all standing on burning platforms, and because the world is constantly shifting and changing. For us to be sustainably successful, we have to cultivate the in-house creativity of our own employees. They know more than what we often give them credit for. They're more talented than what we often give them credit for. And I'm an eternal optimist. Let's give them the reins. Let's ask them to reconstruct the organization or the business unit and the department with a blank slate and see where they go with that. So your challenge, I always give challenges. Before we go to the questions, spend 15 minutes today with a blank slate. I'd ask you to think about, with no organizational constraints, knowing the technology available on the market today, if you were to create your organization or your department from the ground up, what would it look like? How would it operate to ensure that every phase of your organization is value add? I would ask you to consider every handoff. Think about every handoff that occurs from the customer ask to the customer deliverable. Really challenge yourself with this today. It may not be easy to do. Keep working at it. You're going to get some great ideas. I know you will. I really believe in it. And so I'm going to go ahead and open us up for question and answers. I do have, on the end of this slide, recommended books. I got that question last time, so I wanted to make sure I provided that with you today. So Jared, do we have some questions?
Yes, we do. Thank you for your
It's a lot of information in a short amount of time.
And thank you. We're so happy to have it all recorded, so it'll be available on the website as well. So we do have a few questions here.
Okay, great.
The first question we have is, how do you break the barrier to allow for re-engineering to occur?
Yeah, so that barrier could be a couple of different things. So the barrier could be an organizational culture of this is the way we've always done it. That barrier could be disengaged work environment where we've got some folks that are just disengaged, kind of just everybody's working for the weekend, so to speak. There could be organizational barriers, budgets, those kind of things. What I would challenge you to do is to find the naysayers. I always love finding the most disgruntled, because when I go to them and say, hey, I have an idea and I really want to make our workplace better. And I think you see things I don't see. And I need your help in helping me kind of think through this. And so a lot of times, if I can get that person to help me, they'll break apart, they'll tear apart my ideas, which is great because they need to be, right? I don't want to be limited just by my own ideas. And so what I would say is really utilizing a naysayer, utilizing somebody that may have a different social style than you. You're going to have to create a little bit of a guiding coalition, right? There's going to have to be a little motley crew of you that believe in reengineering. And it doesn't have to be a big group. It can be 2 or 3 of you. Keep working at it. Keep working at it. It will be contagious. I promise you, it will be contagious. We're talking about transformational change, and sometimes the hardest thing for us to change in our organizations is culture. But the reality is COVID-19 came in and disrupted a lot of that because we had to think on the fly. So a lot of those barriers are already starting to break apart, or at least they've got cracks in them. Utilize that, right? Optimize that capability there, because I think you're going to find that there's actually less resistance than you think because of the things that we're going through today.
Thank you. Our next question, how can leaders make it open for staff to feel comfortable providing suggestions about safety concerns or childcare concerns without making it a ding on their willingness to be a team player?
Love it. Love it. Fantastic question. Thank you so much for that. So there's a couple of different ways, right? So I'm always a big proponent of, Jared will tell you, I like to do in some of my classes, I do light bulb dark room moments, right? So I get people to write down things and I collect them and I don't look at them and I shuffle them and then I answer right there in real time. And that came about from, I worked for a company once that had an anonymous box that you could put your name if you wanted, but it was in the break room. And people could come in at any time and put in a note, and nobody knew, what that note was. And every Wednesday at 9 a.m., we would have a town hall meeting. And that's when all of us executives would get up and face the firing line. That's when I learned my most about transparency. It was very good for me. But we got asked the hard questions. And we got asked questions like that, and we didn't, and so people didn't have to feel like it was a ding. But another thing about that is leadership is talking to our people and telling them that we care for them. And that what we prioritize based on the job metrics and the job performance of that employee is independent of how the employee may have needs that are personal that need to impact their work. So what I mean by that is saying your work performance is being based on these things. I understand that personal life is always going to have an influence on professional and vice versa. But here are the things that I'm evaluating you on, and here are the things that can contribute to that. If you have a situation of such as childcare that you're needing to address and you're afraid to speak out, I want to give you the opportunity to do it through an anonymous, survey. Do a Google survey for your team where they can write it in anonymously. If they can't come into a break room, that's fantastic to do it that way. Get that feedback and let them have the safety and security of it being anonymous. But also they have to trust you enough. You have to have credibility with them for them to trust you enough to give you that information truly transparently. And that's going to take some time if you don't already have that credibility. And that's something that you're going to want to be thinking about.
Thank you. Next question. with your experience, how can re-engineering help with our changing supply chain?
Yeah, so the changing supply chain is an interesting, you know, and I always say interesting as a euphemism there. It is an interesting situation that we're facing. And I think reengineering allows us to be more flexible and to be nimble, and that is going to be critical. Is being nimble, being creative, being able to think about things, and not being stuck in these tracks that we get ourselves into. So because the supply, we don't know what's always going to be happening with our current supply chain. And we've seen that happening over the last 3 months, 88 days now. I can't remember. I've lost count. But if we're thinking about that, what the last thing we need to be doing is trying to create constraints. The thing that we need to keep just absolutely hammering home is that creativity, that flexibility, that being nimble. And reengineering really allows us to do that, because we can keep asking, how would we create this from scratch, over and over. Again, when I said, do we know all the ways in which we can do our job, or do we just know one way really, really well? The situation we're facing with our current supply chain is absolutely connected to that question, right? Because we've fooled ourselves into thinking that we only have one way to get work done. And that's absolutely not the case. Reengineering breaks all that apart for us. It makes us think outside of that sphere. And so I think asking ourselves over and over again, what is it, if we were to create this from scratch, what does that look like? And then also thinking about, answering that question, do we know all the ways in which we can do our jobs? If we know all the ways in which we can do it, that allows us to be flexible, that allows us to be nimble, that allows us to anticipate what's going to happen in an unknown and uncertain world. Somebody told me that yesterday, I was laughing, I talked to the provost and he said, yeah, and I want you to know, I know all the answers to everything that's going to happen in the fall. Everything, I have it all ready. I said, oh, good, I'm glad, right? And none of us have a clue. None of us have any kind of clue. And that's fine. But what it means is we have to be transparent about that. And we have to sit here and think in a very broad-based term. We have to get out of these very myopic type of ways of thinking that has really been ingrained in us from grade school. We were always kind of taught we had to do things, we had to color in the lines. We had to, write in 12 Times New Roman 12-point font. Everything had to be in some type of structure. And what reengineering says is break that apart and just think about the process. Just think about, how do we get from A to B? Do we really care about all the departments that it's going through? What does that process flow look like? And is there a way that we can better create that? And are there multiple ways that we can better create that? There absolutely are. And I will tell you, if you do the social styles assessment that I have linked here, your analytical people, you typically find them in like marketing, IT, accounting, finance. Those guys, they can think about 8 different ways to do one process, and that's fantastic. The only problem is they get an analysis paralysis and they don't always run with an option. But they can really think through a lot of different strategic plans for you, and I would highly encourage you utilizing those individuals on your teams.
Thank you. We have time for a couple more questions.
Okay.
Next question is, do you see ownership thinking successful in companies?
Do I see ownership? I'm sorry, tell me that again.
Okay, the question reads, do you see ownership thinking successful in companies?
I do. I think when we feel bought into our organization and we feel that we are empowered, I do think that empowerment leadership is going to be the new leadership style that's born out of this pandemic. Because so much of what we've had to do as leaders in the last 2-3 months is really be able to give these types of tasks to our people and empower them into that. And that is that ownership thinking, right? That is giving that ball to people and saying, I don't have time to have checks and balances right now because I just got to get work done. Now, that means that we have been acting a little bit in that firefighting mode. And so transitioning to that lens of a more long-term sustainable plan is going to be very crucial. But I think that we are definitely going to see that type of ownership thinking, empowerment leadership coming to the forefront in the businesses of tomorrow. And I think that's where we're going to get the best out of our people. And when we get the best out of our people in-house, we are going to have better organizations. When we have better organizations, we have better communities. It's just that, you know, it really is what we see over and over and over again. And I believe that so much. And, you know, I always tell my students, they're not just changing their lives or the lives of their families. They are changing our communities. And when I say that, you can see them be kind of like, I'm kind of a big deal. And I'm like, yes, you are. But it's true. We are seeing that happening. When we have better workforces and we allow our people to have growth, our organizations grow. We, at some point in history, got into this mindset that as managers, we had to have kind of the whip, right? And that we didn't want our employees to grow. You just did what I told you to do and deliver the work. And, you know, yours is not to reason why, yours is but to do or die, right? And that is, it made us stagnant and it got us not where we want to be. What we've got to start doing is giving that ownership thinking, giving people that opportunity to be empowered and to move forward.
Wonderful. We have time for this one last question and then some quick housekeeping notes. So the last question, and I apologize, we do have many questions here. Maybe we can
send
have
me emails, please.
We can do that. We can do that. It's just with the time we'd like to keep this at an hour.
Sure.
But the one last question here is the process improvement and evaluation a group process or a top-down process?
Good question. I think you start where you're at. I think you bloom where you're planted, right? So in many ways it could be top down, but it doesn't have to be. Now, to actually change an organization, it could be, but if you're talking just about your own business unit, friends, I've had so much latitude in teams that I have led with using reengineering processes by saying, let's create this from scratch. What are we doing? When we're not doing this by routine anymore, we're doing this with intentionality. And so because I have done that in just small business units, you know, of 10 people, 8 people, you know, and then I've done it in larger groups with 160 people, in entire organizations. So it really can flex, but I would say don't wait for someone else to ask this question of you and for you to start that creativity, because maybe you aren't in a decision-making ability to do that right now, as far as like top-down enactment in the organization. But if you're pushing yourself to come up with these types of creative ideas and you're taking them to people, I promise you're going to start showing your value even more in your organization, and people are going to start listening to you, and they should. That will help your organization, and that's fantastic.
That is fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. Mull, for a great presentation and your strategies to help us understand and address what re-engineering our workplace can look like, and certainly the benefits that can result from such proactive planning. We do all appreciate your time and expertise, and we're very fortunate to have you and the resources of Rockford University available to us all. Thank you all that attended. We hope you found value in today's presentation, and you can take what you have learned here today back with you to your workplace. Of course, if you have any questions or would like to reach out, you can find our information on the website. We do have some upcoming webinars. We have June 23rd, we have a lunch break webinar, a manufacturing conversation with the Illinois Manufacturers Association, the IMA. June 25th, a webinar with Holmstrom Kennedy, and June 30th, a webinar with Henshaw, Understanding the Main Street Lending Program. So for more information on these webinars and other RAEDC resources, please visit the Rockford Area Economic Development Council website. And please do not hesitate to reach out to the Rockford University for additional support and resources. We have a powerhouse of a university right here at our region's center point. Again, thank you all for attending today's presentation. Thank you, Dr. Mull. With that, I will bid, yes, thank you. And with that, we will bid you all a very good day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.